A humble peasant rescues the son of an Apache chief, sparking an unexpected bond between two worlds. As their connection grows, the peasant finds himself caught between loyalty, survival, and the strength of an entire tribe. Get ready for a story of courage, transformation, and the power of unity. The wind carried only dust and memories across the Texas plains. Eliza Montgomery adjusted her straw hat as she walked the familiar trail, leading to her hunting traps. The Brazos River murmured in the distance, a constant melody that had accompanied her since she'd arrived in this arid land 3 years ago. Hey there, thanks for being here. Leave a like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from and what you think of the story. Let's keep going. Another day like all the others, she whispered to herself, but the words were lost in the vast silence. Her worn boots marked a solitary rhythm on the parched earth. The cabin she'd left behind was just a dot on the horizon, too small to cast shade over the memories that haunted her. Thomas, Mary, little Sarah, their names were whispers that the desert swallowed without mercy. The neighbors from Harmony Springs considered her mad for living so isolated, so close to Comanche territory. A woman alone, they said, shaking their heads in disapproval. That's asking for trouble. But Eliza preferred the known dangers of solitude to the pitying looks of other survivors. Here, at least, her grief had room to breathe. She approached her first trap, expecting to find a rabbit or perhaps nothing, as in recent days. Instead, she found something that made her heart race. A man lay beside the trap, motionless, his bronzed skin burned by the merciless sun. His clothes, unlike anything she knew, told a story she wasn't sure she wanted to hear yet. Eliza knelt beside the unconscious man, her hands trembling as she checked for signs of life. His chest rose and fell in shallow breaths, barely perceptible. In the scorching afternoon heat, the leather and beadwork of his clothing told her what her mind already knew. He was Comanche. "Lord help me," she whispered, glancing around the empty landscape as if expecting warriors to emerge from behind every mesquite. Bush. His face was young, perhaps no older than 25, with strong features softened by exhaustion. Dark hair fell across his forehead, and his lips were cracked from dehydration. A decorated pouch lay beside him, its contents scattered, hunting tools and what appeared to be dried meat. Eliza's rational mind screamed at her to walk away, to pretend she'd never seen him. The stories from Harmony Springs echoed in her memory: raids, stolen cattle, settlers who'd disappeared without a trace. Her neighbors would call her a fool, or worse, for what she was contemplating. But as she looked at his still form, she saw only what she'd always seen in suffering: a human being in need. "You're lost, aren't you?" she said softly, though he couldn't hear her. "Just like I was." The sun was merciless overhead, and she knew that without help, he wouldn't survive. Another hour. Her water canteen was nearly full, but it wouldn't be enough to revive him here in the open desert. Eliza stood slowly, her decision crystallizing like morning frost. She couldn't carry him alone. He was too heavy, and the distance to her cabin too great. But she could try to drag him to the shade of the nearby rocks, give him water, and then… Then what? Take him to her home? Harbor a Comanche warrior who might wake up and see her as an enemy? She looked down at his peaceful face, so different from the fearsome reputation of his people. Her fingers unconsciously moved to the small cross at her throat, a habit she'd developed since Thomas's death. "If I leave you here, you'll die," she said aloud, "and I've seen enough death to last a lifetime." With considerable effort, she managed to drag him into the shade of a large boulder. She lifted his head gently and let a few drops of water fall between his cracked lips. He stirred slightly, a soft groan escaping him. "That's it," she encouraged, giving him more water. "Come back." His eyelids fluttered, and for a moment, dark eyes met hers. There was confusion there, and pain, but no immediate hostility. He tried to speak, but only a raspy sound emerged. "Easy," Eliza said. her voice instinctively taking on the soothing tone she'd once used with her children. "You're safe," he attempted to sit up, but weakness overcame him, and he fell back against the rock. His eyes closed again, but his breathing had grown stronger. Eliza made her choice. She couldn't leave him here, not when she had the means to help. Her cabin was modest, but it had shade, clean water, and food if he proved dangerous when he recovered. She'd deal with that when the time came. For now, she chose compassion over fear. "Can you understand me?" she asked, but received no response. "I'm going to get help. My horse is tied near the next trap. Don't try to move," as she hurried away to fetch her mare. Eliza wondered if she was making the biggest mistake of her life, or perhaps its most meaningful act. The journey back to her cabin stretched longer than Eliza had ever remembered. Her mare, Belle, struggled under the additional weight of the unconscious warrior draped across the saddle. Every few minutes, Eliza checked to ensure he was still breathing, her heart clenching each time. His head drooped further forward. "Just a little further," she murmured, as much to herself as to her patient. The sun had begun its descent toward the horizon when her small cabin finally came into view. Never had the humble structure looked more welcoming or more like a sanctuary. She was about to violate with danger. With great difficulty, she managed to half-carry, half-drag the young man inside. He stirred occasionally, mumbling words in a language she didn't recognize, but remained largely unconscious. She settled him on her own bed, the only comfortable place in the sparse cabin, then stepped back to survey what she'd done. A Comanche warrior lay in her bed, vulnerable and dependent on her mercy. The irony wasn't lost on her. After 3 years of neighbors warning her about the threat these people posed, she'd invited one into her most private space. Eliza filled a basin with water from her well and gathered the few medical supplies she possessed. Living alone on the frontier had taught her basic care for wounds and illness, skills she'd wished she possessed when fever took her family. As she began to clean the dust and grime from his face, she noticed details that had escaped her. In the desert, he was handsome in an unfamiliar way, with high cheekbones and a strong jaw. A small scar above his left eyebrow suggested past battles, but his hands, though calloused, showed the careful attention of someone who crafted things with patience. "Who are you?" she whispered, washing dried blood from a cut on his temple. "And what were you doing so far from your people?" He stirred at the sound of her voice, his eyes opening slowly. This time, they remained open, studying her with obvious confusion and growing alertness. Eliza froze, suddenly aware of how vulnerable she was, alone with a warrior who might see her as an enemy. "Water," he said in heavily accented English, the word rough but understandable. Relief flooded through her. He spoke English, which meant communication was possible. She reached for the cup beside the bed and helped him drink, supporting his head with her hand. Slowly, she advised, "You've been unconscious for hours." He drank deeply, then lay back, his dark eyes never leaving her face. "You helped me." It wasn't a question, but a statement of wonder, as if the concept was difficult for him to grasp. "Yes," Eliza said simply. "You needed help." Why? The single word carried layers of meaning. Why help an enemy? Why risk her safety? Why show kindness to someone whose people were feared throughout the territory? Eliza considered her answer carefully. "Because leaving you to die would have been wrong." He studied her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. The wariness remained, but it was joined by something else. Curiosity, perhaps, or the beginning of respect. "I'm Eli," he said finally. "Eli O'Connor." The surname surprised her. "O'Connor, that's the Irish name," he confirmed with a slight smile that transformed his entire face. "My mother, she was captured, raised Comanche, but never forgot her birth name. She gave it to me." Eliza felt something ease in her chest. This wasn't just a feared warrior. He was someone with a story, with connections to the world she knew. "I'm Eliza Montgomery," she replied, "and you're safe here." Eli O'Connor. For the first time since finding him, she truly believed her own words. 3 days passed in careful routine. Eliza tended to Ellie's recovery with the methodical attention she'd once given to her garden. Regular meals, fresh water, and gentle conversation that gradually wore away the walls of suspicion between them. On the third evening, as lamplight flickered against the cabin walls, Eli sat up properly for the first time. His strength was returning, and with it, a restless energy that made the small space feel even smaller. "You should not have saved me," he said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between them. Eliza looked up from her mending. "Should I have left you to die instead? My people, your people, we are enemies, are we?" She set down her needle and thread. "You haven't tried to harm me. I haven't tried to harm you. Where's the enmity in that?" Ellie's jaw tightened. "You do not understand. The settlers in Harmony Springs, they fear us. They have reason to fear us. And do your people have reason to fear the settlers?" The question hung in the air like smoke from the lamp. Eli stared at his hands, and Eliza saw something vulnerable cross his features. "My grandfather remembers when the buffalo covered these plains like clouds cover the sky," he said quietly. "Now they are few. My father remembers when our hunting grounds stretched beyond the horizon. Now they shrink each season." Eliza felt an unexpected pang of recognition. "Loss," she whispered. "You're talking about loss." "Yes." His eyes met hers. "Your people take and take and take. Our young warriors grow angry. They strike back. Your people strike back harder. The circle continues." She understood circles that wouldn't break. Her own grief had trapped her in one for 3 years. "Tell me about your family," she said, surprising herself with the request. Eli hesitated, then began to speak in a voice that grew stronger with each word. "My father is Red Bear, chief of our band, strong leader, but tired of fighting. My mother, Bright Morning. She teaches the children stories from both her worlds. Comanche legends and Irish songs her mother sang. Both worlds," Eliza repeated. "That must be difficult. Sometimes I feel like I belong to neither. Too Irish for some Comanche. To Comanche for any white man." He paused. "Except you? You see me as just Eli." The honesty in his voice touched something deep in Eliza's chest. "I've lost the luxury of seeing enemies everywhere," she admitted. "When fever took my family, I learned that death doesn't choose sides. Pain doesn't choose sides. Kindness. Kindness is what we choose." "Your family," Eli said gently. "Tell me." Eliza felt the familiar tightness in her throat. She rarely spoke of Thomas, Mary, and Sarah to anyone. But something about the lamplight, about this man who straddled two worlds just as she straddled past and present, made the words come easier. Thomas was a good man, gentle. He saw the best in everyone, sometimes to his detriment. A smile ghosted across her lips. Mary was 8, curious about everything. She would have asked you 100 questions by now. And Sarah, her voice caught. Sarah was only 4. She used to collect smooth stones from the river, said they were treasure. "They would have liked you," Eli said with surprising certainty. "How can you know that?" "Because you are like your husband. You see the best in people, even in a lost Comanche warrior who should have been your enemy." They sat in comfortable silence. To people who had learned to carry loss, discovering they didn't have to carry it alone. "I should leave tomorrow," Eli said eventually. "My people will be searching. If they find me here, will there be trouble for you?" "Yes." "They will not understand why you helped me. They will think it is a trap, or that you seek something in return." Eliza considered this. "And if they don't find you, if you simply disappear, they will assume I am dead. My father will mourn. My mother will keen for her lost son." Neither option seemed acceptable. Eliza stared into the lamp flame, thinking of circles that wouldn't break and choices that might create new patterns. "There's a third option," she said slowly. Eli raised an eyebrow. "You tell them the truth, all of it." Dawn broke clear and bright on Ellie's 4th day at the cabin. Eliza found him standing by the window, fully dressed in his cleaned and mended clothes, watching the sun paint the desert in shades of gold and amber. "You're leaving today," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, I am strong enough now, and each day I stay puts you in greater danger." Eliza busied herself preparing breakfast. Though her appetite had vanished, she'd grown accustomed to his presence. The quiet conversations, the way he helped with small tasks despite his injuries, the sense that she wasn't entirely alone anymore. "Will you tell them, your people, about what happened here?" Eli turned from the window. "I will tell my father the truth. That a white woman saved my life when she could have left me to die. That she asked for nothing in return except that I heal. And will he believe you? Red Bear is a wise man. He will listen." Eli paused. "But others may not be so willing to accept that kindness exists between our peoples." They ate breakfast in contemplative silence, both aware that this simple meal marked the end of something that had begun to feel precious. When they finished, Eli stood and walked to where his belongings lay neatly folded. "Before I go," he said, reaching into his decorated pouch, "I have something for you." He pulled out a small object and held it toward her. Eliza gasped softly when she saw what it was, a piece of turquoise, skillfully carved into the shape of a bear, no larger than her thumb. The craftsmanship was exquisite, the stone polished to a deep blue-green that seemed to hold the color of deep water. "I cannot accept this," she said, though her fingers itched to touch the beautiful carving. "You must," Eli insisted. "Among my people, when someone saves your life, a debt is created. This bear is carved from sacred stone. It will protect you, and it will tell others that you are under the protection of Red Bear's son." Eliza stared at the small amulet. "I don't understand. If any of my people see this, they will know you are a friend. They will not harm you." He took her hand gently and placed the carving in her palm. "But more than that, it is a symbol of the bond between us. You saw me not as Comanche or enemy, but as a man in need. This gift acknowledges that honor." The turquoise felt warm in her hand, smooth and substantial. "It's beautiful, Eli, but I can't help feeling I'm accepting something I don't fully comprehend." "You are accepting friendship that crosses the boundaries others have built," he smiled. That transformative expression she'd come to treasure. "My mother always said the strongest medicines come in small packages." Eliza closed her fingers around the bear, feeling its small weight anchor something inside her chest. "Will I see you again?" "I do not know, but I hope so." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Eliza, there is something else you should know." "What?" "My father has been searching for ways to make peace with the settlers, real peace, not just the absence of war. What you did for me, it shows him such peace might be possible." Before she could respond, he was gone, striding across the desert with the easy gait of someone returning home. Eliza watched from her doorway until he became a distant figure, then just a speck, then nothing at all. The cabin felt impossibly empty. She looked down at the turquoise bear in her palm, running her thumb over its smooth surface. Such a small thing to carry such enormous meaning. She didn't know then that Red Bear had indeed been searching for her son for 5 days, or that a band of warriors was already riding toward her cabin, following Ellie's trail. She didn't know that her simple act of compassion had set in motion events that would reshape the delicate balance between two worlds. But she sensed that something fundamental had changed. The turquoise bear seemed to pulse with warmth against her skin as she fastened it around her neck with a leather cord. For the first time in 3 years, Eliza Montgomery felt like she belonged to something larger than her own grief. 2 days after Ellie's departure, Eliza was drawing water from her well when she saw them. 6 riders approached across the desert, moving with the fluid precision of those born to the saddle. Even at a distance, she knew they were Comanche. Her hand instinctively moved to the turquoise bear at her throat, its smooth surface offering small comfort against the fear rising in her chest. She forced herself to stand tall, to show no sign of the terror that threatened to buckle her knees. The riders drew closer, and she could see their paint-marked faces, the eagle feathers in their hair, the weapons at their sides. At their head rode a man whose bearing spoke of natural authority, broad-shouldered, his face weathered by years of leadership and struggle. Red Bear. They stopped 20 yards from her cabin, a respectful distance that somehow made their presence more ominous rather than less. The chief's dark eyes surveyed her, with the intensity of a hawk studying prey, taking in every detail of her appearance, her posture, her small domain. "You are the woman," he said in English heavily accented but clear. His voice carried the weight of mountains. "The one who found my son." Eliz's mouth had gone dry, but she managed to nod. "Yes." Red Bear dismounted with fluid grace, his warriors remaining mounted but alert. He walked closer, stopping just beyond arm's reach, up close. She could see the resemblance to Eli in the strong jaw and intelligent eyes. But where Eli carried the openness of youth, his father bore the careful guardedness of a leader who had seen too much loss. "Where is he?" "He left 2 days ago. He said he was going home. He has not returned to us." The statement hung between them like an accusation. Eliza felt her heart skip. "He was well when he left. Strong. I thought." "You thought what?" "White woman, that you could keep my son. Use him for some purpose of your people." The anger in his voice was controlled but unmistakable. Eliza took a step back, her hand moving unconsciously to the amulet again. The gesture did not go unnoticed. Red Bear's eyes narrowed, focusing on her throat. "Show me what you wear." With trembling fingers, Eliza lifted the leather cord, revealing the carved turquoise bear. The effect on Red Bear was immediate and startling. His rigid posture relaxed slightly, and something like wonder crossed his weathered features. "He gave this to you," he said, and now his voice held amazement rather than anger. "Yes, he said it would. Protect me." Red Bear was silent for a long moment, studying the amulet with reverence. When he spoke again, his tone had completely changed. "This bear was carved by my own hands when Eli reached manhood. It has been blessed by our medicine, man, and carried by my son in 7 battles." He looked up at her face. "He would not give this to someone he did not trust completely. I don't understand. Among my people, such a gift creates bonds that cannot be broken. By accepting it, you have become part of our family's honor." Red Bear's expression grew complex. "Tell me exactly what happened." "All of it." Eliza found herself speaking without hesitation, describing the discovery, the days of care, the conversations by lamplight. Red Bear listened without interruption, his face revealing nothing until she finished. "You asked for nothing in return," he said finally. "Nothing. And when he was well, you let him go." "Of course." Red Bear turned to his warriors and spoke rapidly in their language. Eliza caught the tone. Surprise, perhaps discussion, or even debate. When he turned back to her, she saw a decision forming in his eyes. "My son spoke truth about you," he said. "You are not like other whites. You see beyond the surface to the spirit beneath. I don't know about that. I only know I couldn't let him die. That choice, simple as it seems to you, may change everything. Between our peoples," Red Bear stepped closer. "But first, we must find my son. He should have returned by now." The worry in his voice struck Liz's heart. Despite their differences, despite the fear and misunderstanding, this was simply a father concerned for his child. "I'll help you look for him," she said without thinking. Red Bear's eyebrows rose. "You would do this? Eli is my friend. If something has happened to him for the first time." Red Bear smiled, an expression that transformed his stern features completely. "Perhaps," he said quietly, "peace between our worlds is not impossible after all." The search party moved across the desert like a strange procession, 6 Comanche warriors, their chief, and 1 white woman on horseback, united by concern for a missing son and friend. Eliza rode beside Red Bear, her mare Belle keeping pace. with his painted stallion as they followed the faint trail Eli had left days earlier. "There," said Swift Arrow, one of Red Bear's warriors, pointing to disturbed earth near a cluster of rocks, signs of struggle. They dismounted to examine the area more closely. Eliza's heart sank as she saw what the warriors had found: clear evidence that Eli had not traveled alone on his journey home. Boot prints that weren't his marked the sandy ground, along with the distinctive tracks of shod horses. "White men," Red Bear said grimly, his voice carrying years of bitter experience. "At least 4 of them." "But why would they?" Eliza began, then stopped as understanding dawned. "They saw him leaving my cabin and assumed he had been raiding, perhaps taking you captive." Red Bear's jaw tightened. "They would not have stopped to ask questions," Swift Arrow called out from behind a larger boulder. When they joined him, Eliza saw what had made him grow so still. Drops of dried blood stained the rock, and a piece of torn cloth fluttered from a thorny bush. "He fought them," Red Bear observed, examining the scene with the practiced eye of a warrior. "But they outnumbered him, and he was still weak from his ordeal." "Where would they take him?" Eliza asked, though she dreaded the answer. "Harmony Springs," said another warrior, a young man called Running Wolf. "The settlers there had built a small jail. They would want to question him." The way he said the word question made Eliza's stomach clench. She knew the stories, the suspicion and fear that drove men to acts they might later regret. In a community that had suffered raids and losses, a captured Comanche would not be treated gently. "We must get him back," she said, surprising herself with the fierceness in her voice. Red Bear studied her for a long moment. "You would ride into a settlement of your own people to free a Comanche, warrior?" "I would ride anywhere to help a friend, even knowing that your presence with us marks you as a traitor in their eyes." Eliza hadn't considered this fully, but now she realized the truth of it. By riding with Red Bear, by wearing the sacred amulet, by caring about Ellie's fate, she had crossed a line that many would consider unforgivable. "Then I suppose I'd better make it count," she said quietly. Red Bear's warriors exchanged glances that held both respect and amazement. Swift Arrow spoke rapidly in their language, and Red Bear nodded thoughtfully. "What did he say?" Eliza asked. "He said you have the heart of a warrior, even if you wear the body of a settler woman." Red Bear mounted his horse. "But we cannot simply ride into Harmony Springs. They would shoot us before we could explain our purpose." "Not if I went first," Eliza said, the plan forming even as she spoke. "I could talk to them, explain what really happened, make them see that Eli isn't their enemy. And if they do not listen..." Eliza thought of Ellie's gentle hands as he'd helped her with small tasks around the cabin, of his stories about his mother's Irish songs, of the pain in his eyes when he spoke of the shrinking buffalo herds. "Then we'll find another way," she said with determination she didn't know she possessed. Red Bear was quiet for several minutes, clearly weighing options in his mind. Finally, he spoke. "There is wisdom in your words, but also great danger. If the settlers harm you, then you'll know they cannot be reasoned with," Eliza finished. "But if they listen, if they can be made to understand peace," Red Bear said softly. "You speak of the dream I have carried in my heart for many seasons. Then let's make it more than a dream." As they rode toward Harmony Springs, Eliza felt the weight of the turquoise bear against her chest. Such a small thing to carry such enormous hopes. But as she glanced at Red Bear's profile, set with grim determination, and thought of Eli somewhere ahead, possibly hurt, possibly in chains, she knew she would do whatever it took to bridge the gap between 2 worlds that had forgotten how to trust. The sun was beginning its descent when the buildings of Harmony Springs appeared on the horizon. Eliza took a deep breath, knowing that everything, Ellie's life, the possibility of peace, perhaps her own future, depended on what happened next. The main street of Harmony Springs buzzed with unusual activity as Eliza rode in alone. Men clustered in tight groups, their voices carrying an edge of excitement and fear that made her stomach twist. She recognized several faces from her infrequent visits to buy supplies. Thomas Whitman, who ran the general store, Dr. Samuel Hayes, the town's physician, and Mayor Robert Crawford, whose florid face was even redder than usual. Mrs. Montgomery, Mayor Crawford called out as she dismounted near the jail. "Thank the Lord you're safe. We heard there were Comanche in the area." "There are," Eliza said simply, causing a ripple of alarm through the gathered men. "But they're not here to raid. They're here to retrieve someone who was taken from them." "Taken?" Thomas Whitman stepped forward, his hand resting on the gun at his hip. "Ma'am, I think you might be confused about the situation. We captured a Comanche warrior 2 days ago. He was leaving your property, and we naturally assumed you assumed wrong." Eliza's voice carried a steel that surprised even her. "Eli O'Connor was my guest, not my captor." The name caused a stir of confusion. "O'Connor." Dr. Hayes frowned. "That's not a Comanche name. It's his name nonetheless. He's the son of Red Bear, chief of the Penateka band, and he was injured in the desert. I found him. I helped him heal, and he was returning to his people when your men took him." Mayor Crawford's face had gone from red to pale. "You helped him, Mrs. Montgomery. Surely you realize the danger." "The only danger I see," Eliza interrupted, "is what happens if a peaceful man dies in your jail while his father waits outside town." With 6 warriors, the effect of her words was immediate. Men reached for weapons. Heads swiveled toward the town's perimeter, and voices rose in alarm. "They're here," Whitman demanded. "How many? Are we under attack?" "They're here because their son and brother is missing," Eliza said firmly. "And no, you're not under attack. Red Bear is a man of honor. He wants his son back safely, and he's willing to talk rather than fight." "Talk?" Crawford laughed. But there was no humor in it. "Mrs. Montgomery, with all due respect, you've been living alone too long. These savages don't understand anything but force." The word savages hit Eliza like a physical blow. She thought of Ellie's gentle hands, his stories about his mother's songs, his concern for her safety even when he was the one in need. "Sheriff Morrison." She called to the man standing near the jail's entrance. "I want to see Eli, now." "Mum, I don't think that's wise, Sheriff." Eliza stepped closer, her voice dropping to a tone that brooked no argument. "That young man saved my life in ways you can't understand. I saved his in return. If you've hurt him," she let the threat hang unfinished. But something in her expression made the sheriff step aside. The jail was small, containing only 2 cells. Eli sat in the far one, his back against the wall, dried blood on his face from what was clearly a beating. When he saw her, his eyes widened with alarm. "Eliza, you should not be here. It is too dangerous." "For whom?" She gripped the bars. "Between them. Are you hurt badly?" "I will heal." His gaze searched her face. "But you must leave. These men, they will not listen to reason. They will if they want to avoid a war." From behind her, Sheriff Morrison snorted. "One woman and a handful of redskins don't make a war, Mrs. Montgomery." Eliza turned to face the assembled men who had crowded into the small jail. "You're right, Sheriff, but word of this will spread. Other bands will hear that Harmony Springs captures peaceful Comanche and beats them in cells. Red Bear's restraint won't extend to every warrior in the territory." The men exchanged uneasy glances. Mayor Crawford cleared his throat. "What exactly are you proposing?" "I'm proposing you release Eli to his father's custody. I'm proposing you sit down with Red Bear and hear what he has to say. I'm proposing you consider that maybe, just maybe, peace is worth more than pride." "And if we refuse?" Dr. Hayes asked quietly. Eliza looked back at Eli, who was watching her with an expression of amazement and growing hope. Then she faced the men again. "Then you'll face Red Bear's warriors with the knowledge that you chose conflict over conversation. And when the violence comes, and it will come, you'll know it could have been prevented by simply treating another human being with dignity. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of horses approaching from outside. Through the jail's small window, they could see riders on the ridge overlooking town. "It appears," Mayor Crawford said with resignation, "that we have visitors." Eliza touched the turquoise bear at her throat. "Yes," she said quietly, "we do." The tension in Harmony Springs was palpable as Red Bear and his warriors rode slowly down the main street. Their horses moved at a deliberate pace, neither threatening nor retreating, while townspeople scattered into buildings or peered from behind curtains. The chief's eyes never left the jail where his son was held. Eliza stepped out of the building, positioning herself between the approaching Comanche and the armed settlers, who had gathered in defensive positions. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but she forced herself to walk forward with steady steps. "Red Bear," she called out, her voice carrying clearly in the tense silence. "Thank you for coming." The chief dismounted, his movements fluid despite the obvious strain of the situation. Behind him, his warriors remained mounted but ready, their hands near their weapons but not yet drawn. "Is my son alive?" Red Bear asked, his voice carefully controlled. "He is. He's been hurt, but he'll recover." Eliza turned slightly to address both groups. "He can walk out of the jail right now if we can all agree to act like civilized human beings." Mayor Crawford stepped forward, flanked by Sheriff Morrison and several armed men. "Mrs. Montgomery, while we appreciate your intervention, this is a matter for the proper authorities." "I am the proper authority for my son," Red Bear said, his English precise despite his accent. "You have taken him without cause." "Without cause?" Crawford's voice rose. "He was leaving the scene of what we assumed was an attack." "You assumed?" Red Bear interrupted. "You did not ask. You did not investigate. You saw a Comanche and decided he must be guilty of something." Dr. Hayes, who had remained quieter than the others, stepped closer. "Chief Red Bear, surely you understand our position. We've had raids, losses, as have we." Red Bear replied. "Our hunting grounds shrink. Our people are pushed from lands our grandfathers walked. Our young men die in skirmishes that solve nothing." Eliza felt a shift in the atmosphere. Some of the settlers were listening, really listening, for the first time. "What do you want?" she asked Red Bear directly. "I want my son, and I want to. In this cycle of violence that serves no one, you're talking about peace." Sheriff Morrison said skeptically. "Real peace." "I am talking about survival," Red Bear corrected. "For both our peoples, the old ways are failing. The buffalo are gone. The soldiers come in greater numbers each year. We must find a new path, or we will all be consumed by war." From inside the jail, Ellie's voice called out, "Father, I am unharmed. These people, they fear what they do not understand." Red Bear's jaw tightened at the sound of his son's voice. "Release him, and we will talk." "Talk about what exactly?" Mayor Crawford demanded. Eliza stepped between them again. "About sharing the land instead of fighting over it. About trade instead of raids. About raising children who don't have to fear each other." "Impossible," someone muttered from the crowd. "Is it?" Eliza challenged. "Eli and I proved it wasn't impossible. We talked. We shared meals. We told stories. We found common ground." "You're one woman," Thomas Whitman called out. "This is about entire peoples. Every peace begins with one person choosing to trust another," Red Bear said quietly. "My son trusted this woman with his life. She trusted him with hers. If they can do this, why cannot we?" The silence stretched long and tense. Finally, Dr. Hayes spoke up. "What kind of arrangement are you proposing?" "Shared hunting grounds," Red Bear said immediately, as if he'd been thinking about this for a long time. "Trade agreements. Mutual protection against raiders and outlaws who prey on both our peoples. And if some of your young warriors decide they prefer the old ways," Sheriff Morrison asked, "then they will face me," Red Bear replied with quiet authority. just as your young men who choose violence over peace will face your laws. Mayor Crawford looked around at his constituents, reading their faces, fear, war with curiosity, prejudice with a desperate hope for an end to constant conflict. "Sheriff," he said finally, "release the prisoner." The jail door opened, and Eli emerged. Squinting in the afternoon sunlight, he moved slowly, favoring his left side, but he walked with dignity to his father's side. Red Bear's hand briefly touched his son's shoulder, a gesture of profound relief. "Now what?" Crawford asked. Eliza felt the weight of the moment settling on her shoulders. "Now we sit down together," she said. "We talk. We listen. We try to build something better than what we've had." Red Bear nodded. "My people have a saying, 'The river that bends does not break.' Perhaps it is time for both rivers to learn to bend." As the two groups began to cautiously approach each other, Eliza touched the turquoise bear at her throat. Such a small thing to have started such enormous changes. But perhaps that was how peace always began, with small acts of trust that grew into something larger than anyone could have imagined. The sun was setting over Harmony Springs, painting the sky in shades of hope and possibility. 3 weeks had passed since the tense confrontation in Harmony Springs, the town's meeting hall, once used only for church services and social gatherings, had become an unlikely center of diplomacy. Eliza found herself attending these sessions regularly, serving as translator not just of languages, but of cultures and intentions. The negotiations had yielded small victories. A shared water source was established near Miller's Creek. Trading protocols were agreed upon, Comanche horses and hides for settler tools and grain. Most importantly, both sides had committed to investigating incidents before assuming guilt. But Eliza could sense the underlying tensions that threatened this fragile peace. "Someone's been stealing cattle from the Henderson place," Sheriff Morrison announced during one morning session. 3 had missing. Tracks leading west toward Comanche territory. The atmosphere in the room immediately shifted. Red Bear's warriors stiffened, while several settlers reached instinctively for weapons that had been left outside in accordance with the meeting protocols. "Have you investigated?" Red Bear asked calmly, though Eliza detected steel beneath his composed exterior. "The tracks are clear enough," Morrison replied. "Indian ponies, unshod. Many people ride unshod horses." Eli interjected from his position beside his father. His injuries had healed, but the experience had left him more serious, more watchful. Outlaws often use them to avoid detection. "Convenient excuse," muttered Henderson. The affected rancher. Eliza stood up. "Have any of you actually examined these tracks, or are we making assumptions again?" The silence that followed was telling. She continued, "I propose we all ride out together, look at the evidence, make decisions based on facts, not fear." Mayor Crawford shifted uncomfortably. "Mrs. Montgomery, while your mediation has been valuable, this is a serious accusation, which is exactly why it deserves serious investigation," she replied firmly. Red Bear nodded approvingly. "My son and I will accompany this investigation. If my people are responsible, they will make restitution and face tribal justice. And if they're not," Dr. Hayes asked, "then we will help find who is." Red Bear answered, "A crime against our allies is a crime against us." The word allies caused another stir. It was the first time anyone had used such language, acknowledging what everyone was beginning to feel but hadn't dared articulate. The investigation party rode out that afternoon, an unusual group of Comanche warriors, town officials, and one determined widow. At the Henderson Ranch, they found more than cattle tracks. Eli dismounted and studied the ground with the trained eye of a tracker. "These horses," he said after several minutes, "they wear shoes recently removed. See here, the nail holes in the hooves." Sheriff Morrison knelt beside him, examining the evidence. "You're right, someone wanted these tracks to look Indian. But who would?" Henderson began, then stopped as understanding dawned. Thomas Whitman, who had been notably absent from recent meetings, owned the neighboring property. He had been vocal about his opposition to the peace talks, claiming they made the settlers look weak. Tom's been struggling financially, Dr. Hayes said quietly. Lost most of his crop to drought last season. The implications hung heavy in the air. Someone from their own community was sabotaging the peace process for personal gain. What do we do now? Henderson asked. Red Bear's expression was grim, but resolute. We find this man. We make him answer for his crimes, and we show both our peoples that justice serves peace, not politics, as they rode toward Whitman's property. Eliza felt the weight of how precarious their progress truly was. It would take only one act of bad faith, one moment of fear overcoming reason, to destroy everything they'd built. But looking at the mixed group riding together, settler and Comanche united in purpose, she also felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope that transcended her personal grief and reached towards something larger than herself. Thomas Whitman's ranch sat in a hollow between two hills, its buildings weathered and showing signs of neglect. As their mixed party approached, Eliza noticed the unusual number of cattle in his holding pen, far more than she remembered from previous visits. Tom's got company, Sheriff Morrison observed, pointing to several horses tied near the barn. Don't recognize those brands. Red Bear held up his hand, signaling the group to stop. We approached carefully. If cornered men grow desperate, innocent people die. They dismounted and spread out. Eliza staying close to Eli despite his whispered protests about her safety as they drew nearer. Voices carried from inside the barn. Heated discussion that stopped abruptly when a lookout spotted them. Tom Whitman, Sheriff Morrison called out. We need to talk. The barn door opened slowly, and Whitman emerged with three other men Eliza didn't recognize. Their faces were hard, their hands close to their weapons. Behind them, she could see the Henderson cattle, still bearing their distinctive brands. Sheriff, Whitman said with forced casualness. What brings you out this way? Those cattle, Morrison replied, nodding toward the pen. They belong to Henderson. Whitman's jaw tightened. Don't know what you're talking about, Tom. Eliza stepped forward, her voice gentle but firm. We found the tracks leading here. We know about the removed horseshoes. It's over. Over. Whitman laughed bitterly. What's over is this community's backbone. You've got us making treaties with savages, sharing our land, pretending they're civilized. They are civilized, Eliza replied. More civilized than stealing from your neighbors and blaming innocent people. One of the strangers, a lean man with cold eyes, spat in the dirt. Lady, you've been living with redskins so long, you've forgotten which side you're on. Eli moved protectively closer to Eliza. She has chosen the side of honor, something you would not recognize. The stranger's hand dropped to his gun. I don't take lectures from no half-breed. The situation balanced on a knife's edge. Red Bear stepped forward, his voice carrying the authority of leadership. Thomas Whitman, you have taken cattle that are not yours. You have tried to destroy the peace our peoples have worked to build. Why? Whitman's composure cracked. Because I'm losing everything. My crops failed. My debts are mounting. And meanwhile, you're giving away our birthright to a bunch of enough. Sheriff Morrison interrupted. Tom, you're under arrest for cattle theft and inciting conflict. You and your friends need to come with me. The cold-eyed stranger drew his weapon. I don't think so, Sheriff. In the tense moment that followed, Eliza saw everything clearly. The fear in Whitman's eyes, the calculated violence in his companions, the way Red Bear's warriors had positioned themselves protectively around the settlers in their group. Wait, she said, stepping between the drawn guns. Tom, these men don't care about your troubles. They're using your desperation for their own purposes. Smart woman, the stranger sneered. Too smart for her own good. Red Bear's voice cut through the tension like a blade. You are outnumbered and outmatched. Surrender now, and you will be treated with justice. Continue this path, and you will face the consequences of your choices. Whitman looked around at The faces surrounding him, his neighbors, the Comanche warriors, the hard men he had allied himself with. For a moment, Eliza thought he might choose reason. Instead, he grabbed her arm and pulled her against him, a knife appearing at her throat. "Nobody moves," he said desperately. "Nobody, or she dies." The turquoise bear pressed against Liz's chest as Whitman's blade touched her skin. Around them, weapons were drawn on all sides, the fragile piece they built hanging by a thread as thin as the edge against her throat. In that frozen moment, she realized that some bridges could only be built by those willing to stand in the space between worlds, no matter the cost. Time seemed frozen as Whitman's knife pressed against Liz's throat. She could feel his desperate trembling, smell the fierce sweat that had nothing to do with the Texas heat. Around them, weapons were drawn but not aimed. Both settlers and Comanche warriors waiting for someone to make the first move. "That could end everything, Tom," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the blade at her neck. "This isn't you. This isn't who you want to be. You don't know what I want," he hissed. "You don't know what it's like to watch everything slip away while you smile and make friends with the enemy." "They're not the enemy," Eliza replied. "Your fear is." Red Bear stood motionless, his eyes fixed on Whitman with the intensity of a predator calculating distance and timing. But when he spoke, his voice was calm. "Thomas Whitman, release her. Take my life instead." The offer stunned everyone, including Whitman. "What? You hate my people. Blame us for your troubles. Take the chief of the Pentateuch band. Let the woman go." "Father, no," Eli said sharply. But Red Bear silenced him with a look. Whitman's grip on Eliza loosened slightly, as confusion replaced some of his desperation. "Why would you? What's the trick?" "No trick. She has done nothing but try to build peace. I am the one who signed agreements that threaten your old ways. If blood must be spilled, let it be mine." Sheriff Morrison took a small step forward. "Nobody's blood needs to be spilled. Tom, put down the knife. We'll work something out." "Work what out?" Whitman laughed bitterly. "I'm ruined either way. My debts, my reputation can be rebuilt," Dr. Hayes said unexpectedly. "Tom, you're a good man who made bad choices. That's not the same as being a bad man." The cold-eyed stranger grew impatient. "Enough talking. Kill the woman and let's finish this." But something in the voices around him, settler and Comanche alike, seemed to reach Whitman. The knife trembled against Liz's skin. "They don't care about you, Tom," she said softly. "These men, they'll disappear as soon as the shooting starts. But these people here, your neighbors, they're offering you a way back." Eli stepped forward slowly, his hands visible and empty. "In my culture, a man's honor is not measured by his mistakes, but by how he faces them. You still have time to choose honor." Whitman's breathing was ragged, the knife wavered. I just wanted to survive," Red Bear finished. "We all do. That's why we must help each other instead of destroying each other." The moment stretched taut as a bowstring. Then, with a sob of defeat and relief, Whitman dropped the knife and released Eliza. She stumbled forward into Ellie's protective embrace as Sheriff Morrison quickly secured Whitman. The cold-eyed stranger cursed and raised his gun, but found himself facing a wall of weapons from both sides, outnumbered and abandoned. He and his companions surrendered died as the immediate danger passed. Eliza felt the turquoise bear warm against her chest. She looked around at the mixed group, settlers and Comanche who had stood together, ready to protect each other despite the risk. "Tom," she said, turning to Whitman as Morrison prepared to take him away. "What you did was wrong, but it doesn't have to define who you become." He nodded, tears streaming down his weathered face. "I'm sorry, Eliza. I'm so sorry." Red Bear approached them. "In my tribe, we believe that a man can be reborn through right action. Perhaps, when you have paid your debt, you will find a new path." As they prepared to return to Harmony Springs, Eliza realized something profound had happened. They had faced the worst of fear and desperation together, and peace had not broken. Instead, it had grown stronger, tested by fire, and proven true. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of forgiveness and new beginnings. 6 months had passed since the confrontation at Whitman's ranch. Harmony Springs had settled into an unprecedented rhythm of cooperation. Comanche children learning English alongside settler children, joint hunting parties ensuring fair distribution of game, and trading posts that had become centers of cultural exchange rather than mere commerce. But on this gray November morning, Eliza sat alone in her cabin, staring at her empty hands. The turquoise bear was gone. She had discovered its absence 3 days ago when she reached for it during her morning ritual, a habit that had brought her comfort and strength since Eli first placed it around her neck. The leather cord had broken sometime during her sleep, and despite searching every corner of her small home, the sacred amulet was nowhere to be found. The loss felt disproportionate to the size of the object. It was as if a piece of her newfound identity had vanished, leaving her questioning everything she'd become in these past months. A soft knock interrupted her brooding. She opened the door to find Eli standing on her threshold, his expression concern. "You missed the council meeting," he said. "That's not like you." Eliza stepped aside to let him enter. "I wasn't feeling well." Eli studied her face with a perceptive gaze she'd come to know well. "What troubles you?" "My friend," the words spilled out before she could stop them. About the missing amulet, about feeling untethered, about wondering if her role as peacemaker had been built on a symbol rather than substance. Without the bear, she concluded, "I don't know if I truly belong in either world." Eli was quiet for a long moment. Then he moved to her small table and sat down, gesturing for her to join him. "Tell me about your husband," he said unexpectedly. "Thomas, I don't understand the humor me. What made him special?" Eliza's throat tightened. "He was kind, patient. He saw good in everyone, even when they couldn't see it in themselves." "And your children?" Mary was curious about everything. She collected stories the way other children collect stones. "Sarah." Eliza smiled despite her sadness. Sarah had this way of making everyone feel important, even the smallest gesture from her felt like a gift. "Did you love them because of things they owned? Because of tokens or symbols?" "Of course not. I loved them for who they were." Eli leaned forward. "The bear did not make you the bridge between our peoples, Eliza. You became that bridge because of who you are. The woman who couldn't leave a stranger to die in the desert. The courage you showed, the compassion, the strength to stand between armed groups and speak for peace. These came from inside you. But the bear was proof. The bear was a symbol of gratitude and respect. But symbols can be lost or stolen. The qualities they represent cannot be taken from you unless you surrender them." Eliza felt tears threatening. "I miss them. Eli, Thomas, Mary, Sarah. Some days I feel guilty for building this new life when they're gone. Do you think they would want you to remain frozen in grief?" The question hit her like a physical blow. She imagined Thomas's gentle disapproval of wasted sorrow, Mary's excitement at her mother's adventures, little Sarah's delight in the friendships her mother had forged. "No," she whispered. "They would want me to live, to love, to keep building bridges, then honor them by doing exactly that." Eli reached across the table and took her hand. "The bear was my gift to you, but you have given me something far more valuable. Hope that the peoples can choose understanding over hatred." A soft sound from outside made them both look up. Through the window, Eliza saw Red Bear approaching, accompanied by several warriors and an equal number of settlers. Mayor Crawford rode among them, as did Dr. Hayes and Sheriff Morrison. "What's happening?" she asked. Eli smiled, the expression transforming his face. "Come and see." They stepped outside to find the mixed group dismounting near her cabin. Red Bear approached, his weathered face solemn, but his eyes warm. "Eliza Montgomery," he began formally, "we have come to ask something of you." "What is it?" "We have been discussing the future of our alliance, the needs of both our peoples. We believe we need someone to speak for all of us when traitors come, when government officials arrive, when decisions must be made that affect everyone. Mayor Crawford stepped forward. We'd like you to be our official mediator, a permanent position. With a cabin built at the midpoint between Harmony Springs and the Comanche encampment, Eliza stared at them, overwhelmed. I don't know what to say. Say yes. Dr. Hayes encouraged. You've already been doing the job. We just want to make it official. Red Bear reached into his pouch and withdrew something that made Eliza's breath catch. Her turquoise bear. But now it hung from a new cord. One woven with both Comanche beadwork and settler fabric. Swift Arrow found this near the creek. Red Bear explained. When we realized what it meant to you, we knew we had to return it properly. As he placed the restored amulet around her neck, Eliza felt the weight of it settle against her heart, not just the bear, but the responsibility and trust it represented. I accept, she said, her voice strong with newfound purpose. 1 year later, Eliza stood in the doorway of her new cabin, watching the sun rise over a landscape that had become something she'd never imagined possible. The building sat exactly halfway between Harmony Springs and the Comanche encampment, a physical symbol of the bridge she had become between two worlds. Children's laughter carried on the morning breeze. Both settler and Comanche youngsters playing together in the meadow where her vegetable garden flourished. Mary Whitman, the blacksmith's daughter, was teaching young running deer how to braid wildflowers, while he showed her how to identify edible plants. The meeting went well yesterday, Eli said, joining her on the porch with 2 cups of coffee. The government officials had finally arrived to formalize the land agreements, and their initial skepticism had given way to amazement at what they found. Better than well, Eliza replied, accepting the warm cup gratefully. When Captain Morrison saw our trading post records, our joint patrol schedules, our shared school, she smiled. I think we may have given Washington something to think about over the past year. Their alliance had grown beyond anyone's expectations. The shared water source had become a gathering place where news was exchanged and friendships formed. Joint patrols had virtually eliminated bandit activity in the region. Most remarkably, the small school they had established had become a model that other territories were beginning to inquire about. Your father seems pleased with the federal recognition, Eliza observed. He is. But more than that, he's proud of what we built together. Eli sipped his coffee, his eyes distant with thought. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if you hadn't found me the day in the desert. Someone else would have, Eliza said with certainty. Maybe not the day, maybe not me, but eventually, people who want peace find ways to create it. A rider approached from the direction of Harmony Springs, Dr. Hayes. Making his morning rounds to check on patients in both communities, he'd become something of a bridge himself, his medical knowledge transcending cultural boundaries. Morning, Eliza, Eli, he called out, dismounting with the easy familiarity of frequent visits. Got a letter for you from Austin. Eliza accepted the official-looking envelope with curiosity. As she read, her eyebrows rose. What is it? Eli asked. The territorial governor wants to meet with us. Apparently, our experiment in cooperative governance has attracted attention all the way to Washington. Good attention or bad attention? Dr. Hayes inquired. Good, I think. They're talking about using our model for other frontier settlements. The 3 sat in comfortable silence, digesting this news. What had begun as one woman's simple act of compassion had grown into something that might reshape relationships across the frontier. Are you ready for the kind of responsibility? Eli asked. Eliza touched the turquoise bear at her throat, its familiar weight a constant reminder of how far she'd traveled from the isolated, grieving widow she'd once been. The amulet still carried the sacred meaning Eli had given it, but now it also held the hopes and dreams of 2 communities that had learned to see beyond their differences. I think, she said slowly, that I've been preparing for it my whole life, even when I didn't know it. Children's voices rose again from the meadow, English and Comanche words mixing naturally in their play. A trader's wagon approached from the east, knowing it would find fair dealing and safe passage. In the distance, smoke rose from cooking fires in both the settlement and the encampment, marking the daily rhythm of lives lived without fear. Eliza Montgomery had come to Texas carrying nothing but grief and the desperate need for solitude. She had found instead purpose, friendship, and the profound satisfaction of building something lasting. The desert that had once seemed so empty now bloomed with possibility. As the sun climbed higher, painting the sky in shades of hope